Shalom, in connection with the sugya, the beginning of Sechas Chagiga, the Beis on Beis and Gimel Amud Aleph, about a Cheresh being obligated in mitzvahs, or being putter from mitzvahs, depending whether he's a shemeya, medaber, ein medaber, ein shemeya, ein medaber, ein shemeya, as well as Hashem soon discuss. We'd like to discuss these halachas. This is the main sugya in Shas about a Cheresh being chayiv or not in mitzvahs, depending on his shmiya and dibur. And it has a lot of implications, la halacha, which we're trying to clarify. Three types of cheroshim are discussed here in the sugya. One's a cheresh that's medaber beino shemeya, that he's able to speak even though he's not able to hear. The second is a shemeya beino medaber, someone's able to hear even though he's not able to speak. And both of those are considered to be kabikei l'chol dvarav, are considered to be completely responsible for mitzvahs, chayav kol mitzvah shabbatayra. And the third is an Eino Medaber of Eino Shemeya, someone that can neither speak nor hear, doesn't have either faculty, and he's patur b'kol mitzvahs, he's patur for all mitzvahs, he's not considered to be a bar das. And that is the standard cheresh, shedibru b'chol makom, as the Mishnah in Truma says, as quoted over here in the Gemara Beis on Beis. Cheresh shedibru b'chol makom is a Eino Medaber of Eino Shemeya that can neither hear nor speak. And he's considered to be not a bar das, patur b'kol mitzvahs. So I'd like to discuss each one of these three types of cheroshim one by one and understand their background classically and their application nowadays in our contemporary situation. The first one is a cheresh that's medaber ve'eino shemeya. He's able to speak, but he's not able to hear. And the first question asks, how's that possible? How did he learn how to speak and talk if he never heard any speech, anyone talking? If he can't hear, how did he learn how to speak? So Rashi on the page on Beis says, "The metchila he was shemeya ba'achad nescharesh." That initially we're talking about a person that was born able to hear, and therefore was able to learn how to speak. And postlingually, after learning how to speak, he lost his hearing. So now he's a medaber, ve'eino shemeya. He's able to speak, is not able to hear. That's how Rashi explains it, which is the standard simple case. I'll tell you a very unusual case, which I know firsthand. That is the case of Helen Keller. Helen Keller was famous. She was born both deaf and blind, and yet, incredibly, she learned how to speak. I know this firsthand because I knew Dr. Kalman Yaakov Mann, Olav Shalom. Dr. Mann was the Director General of a Daas hospital in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, for about 40 years, from the early 50s until the 80s. And he told me that in 1952 about Helen Keller came to visit Daas Hospital, and she gave a speech. She talked to all the nurses about people dealing with people with special needs. And she was able to speak, and they were able to understand her. Dr. Mann told me her voice, her speech was gruff. It was almost like a barking type of a sound, but it was intelligible. You were able to understand what she was saying, and the nurses understood her speech that she told them. It was an incredible thing that she was able to be taught how to speak, just by touch, by feeling, by touching her mouth, touching her neck. That was a feat that's rarely been duplicated. And that became, she became what we would consider halachically, what our Mishnah would call a medaber ve'eino shemeya. Never be able to hear, but yes, able to speak intelligibly, understandably. That's a very rare case. A very common case, very, very commonplace, is someone that's born with a hearing impairment and naturally would not be able to hear, but with hearing aids and or cochlear implant, they're able to hear. And because they're able to hear, they learn how to speak. And once they learn how to speak, they're medaber af b'she'eino shemeya. Mishnah Berurah Paskins and Siman Nun Vav, Sivkot Nun Ches, I think, that even if he can't hear whatsoever, he is still considered to be a medaber ve'eino shemeya. He's mechuyev in mitzvahs, and he counts into a minyan in shul. You could count him in for the 10 people for all the functions that we do in shul, Kaddish and Kedusha and Kriyas Torah and all the Dvarim Sheba Kedusha. So he's considered to be like a medaber ve'eino shemeya with no hearing at all, as long as he can speak. So whether the artificial hearing with the hearing aid is considered to be natural hearing or not, but right now he became a medaber, and therefore we have a more commonplace situation of a contemporary medaber ve'eno shemeya, even if we would not count his hearing. Ramesha, Zichron Bracha, Ramesha finds in the Igros Moshe, in the third Chelik of Ebed Ezra Simulam Gimel, he's of the opinion that he's not considered to be a Shemeya because he has a hearing aid. You need to have natural hearing in order to be able to be a Shemeya, while others, including Ravad Yosef, in the Yabia Omer, Chelik Zayin Eben Ezra Siman Yud Ches, Shuvas on Haggai, so Ramesha Sternberg Shlita, amongst other poskim, say it's a matter of functionality. If they could hear, even with a device, that's also considered to be a Shemeya. But whether he's considered to be a Shemeya or not, he's definitely a Medaber as long as you can understand him. What extent does a person have to be able to speak in order to be considered to be Medaber? Sometimes they speak, but it's a little bit difficult to understand, or very difficult to understand. So both Rosh Shlomo Zalman, Auerbach Zal, in the Midrash Shlomo, Chelik Aleph Siman Lamed Daled, as well as Rabbi Yashav, in his Koved Shuvas, Chelik Aleph Siman Yud, both paskin, they actually paskin sitting together, that as long as he's able to make out what he wants to say, even though you can't make out every word, and it's difficult to hear him, but if a person that's not like immediate family or a therapist, someone that works with him all the time, if a regular person is able to understand him, understand what he wants to say, basically, that's considered to be a medaber. Medaber means that through dibur you give across an idea that will be understood by the listener, and that's medaber. Therefore, he's a medaber beino shemeya, and he's considered to be echol davar. I'll tell you a little personal incident with my son that was hearing impaired and had hearing aids, and it was going through speech therapy. We had a very, very difficult to understand level of speech at that early age, about 4 or 5 years old. And I wanted to test him whether he is a medaber, at least to be a medaber ve'eno shemeya. You know, he can't be a shemeya, but at least he's a medaber to be chayv mitzvahs, emerging when he becomes bar mitzvah. So I took him to a bakery. I stood outside. I gave him $1. I told him, go inside and buy yourself a chocolate donut. So he had to walk in by himself and tell the lady behind the counter, please give me a chocolate donut. And his speech was very difficult to understand, but she understood what he said, and she gave him a chocolate donut that he paid for. It came out with a big smile on his face. And I said, he's a medaber ve'eno shemeya, as long as he could get the message across. And likewise, a shemeya ve'eno medaber, a person is able to hear, doesn't have to hear everything perfectly, but he's able to hear basically what's being said and get the gist, the idea of what the person is speaking to him. That's called to be a shemeya. A person that's medaber ve'eno shemeya, he's able to speak, since he's considered to be a bar Daas and chayv and mitzvahs. So we said from the Mishnah Berurah that he's mitzvah to the minyan. The Pri Megadim in Kuf Lamed Tes says that he can also get an aliyah. He could be called up to the Torah, even though he's not going to be able to hear the Baal Korah relating the Torah, but he could read. He's able to speak. So as long as he can read along with at least 3 psukim, doesn't have to read the entire parsha, or the whole aliyah, but as long as he can read at least 3 psukim, which is the minimum for Kriyas Torah, then he's a medaber. He's chayv and mitzvahs. He could get aliyah. He can make a bracha on that before and after. The Mishnah Berurah takes us further in Hilchos Purim, coming up soon, in Simon Tafresh Peites. They says, according to most poskim, Rishonim and Achronim, he could even lane the Megillah, if he knows how to lane it, for others to be Yitzah with him, because since he's Muchiyah b'mitzvahs and he's able to read, so his Kriya is a kosher Kriya. Over here on Daf Beis on Beis, Tosafos brings down the Mishnah Megillah Daf Yotes on Beis that says that a Cheresh is not able to be motzi others with Kriya. But most of Rishonim and Achronim that the Mishnah Berurah brings down and the Bir Halacha say that's going according to one Manda Amar that requires to be able to hear and speak. But we pass like the other Manda Amar, as long as he can speak, then he's able to even do the laning too. So these are halachas regarding a medaber ve'eno shemeya, person that could speak. Likewise, a person that could only hear, shemeya ve'eno medaber, has basically the same halachas. But his case is a rarity. His case is not so common. And the reason for that is the reason that a person normally is a cheresh, he's not able to speak, is because he can't hear. It's a hearing impairment that causes his difficulty in speaking, or his lack of ability to speak. The Rambam in the Parish Mishnayos on this Mishnah in Trumos that the Gemara brings over here on Daf Beis on Beis says Sibas ha'ilmus hi ha'chereshus. The cause of mutedness, of inability to speak, is deafness, is the inability to hear. A person doesn't hear, then they don't learn the language, they don't learn the speech that people around them are speaking. When he hears it, then he speaks just like his parents and people around him speak in the same language, the same way, the same accent they speak, because what he hears is how he speaks. But if you can't hear, you don't learn how to speak. So that's why when a person can't hear, it's an achievement that he's able to learn how to speak, as we said. Like Rashi said beforehand, he learned, or like Helen Keller, or with devices nowadays, hearing aids and such. But otherwise, if you don't hear, how can you learn how to speak? But a person could hear, why can't he speak? So Shemei Aveinu B'Daber is a different situation. It's not a hearing loss problem behind his issue, but rather he has some kind of a malfunction or maldevelopment of his klei hadibur, his vocal cords, or his palate, or his mouth, and being able to mouth words and speak, which is a different deformity. It's not the common neurosensoral hearing loss, which usually is the case of hearing losses, which are addressed by hearing aids and Kolkut Mitz, as we'll discuss. So that's a Medaber Vein of Shemei and a Shemei Medaber Medaber. Now let's talk about a Eno Medaber of Eno Shemei, which is the classic case that our Mishnah says, that our Gemara says we're talking about, that's considered to be like a Cheresh Shait of a Koton. He's considered to be not a Bar Das, and he's Pater Mikol HaMitzvahs. Why is it that a Cheresh, like Eno Medaber of Eno Shemei, is considered to be Eno Bar Das? Where does that come from? Why is it so? There are nowadays whole communities of people that do not speak and do not hear. They communicate with sign language, and they go through school. They even go through university and get degrees in MIT in Rochester and Gallaudet in Washington, D.C., and other places. They have communities of thousands of these people that they communicate with each other. They get educated. They hold jobs. They have families. They certainly seem intelligent and smart people. And we say that Eno Bar Das. What does that mean? And the truth is, we can ask this question even about a Cheresh B'Katan. Let's talk about a Katan. A Shot is insane. He's irrational. It's a mental illness. But what about a Katan? A Katan up to Bar Mitzvah, Bas Mitzvah age. It could be very bright, very intelligent. They could be sometimes even quicker at their mind, more nimble than their adult parents and teachers. They could be computer whizzes and chess champions and creative thinkers, and they could be lamdanim. They could memorize Gemaras and they could ask kashas. We can't say that children are not smart. They're very, very smart. They have high IQs, and they could be very intelligent. So what does it mean when we say that a katan is an Eno Bar Das? Das, therefore, obviously does not mean simple smartness or IQ intelligence. What does Das mean? Das means to be able to have a sound opinion, a sense of judgment, to be able to know what's right to do, to be able to assess a situation and figure out what a proper yishuv das, a judgment about what the right thing is. A child is impulsive. He acts on the spur of the moment, of his feelings, what he likes to do, and he goes and does it. He doesn't yet take into considerations the ramifications, what the outcome, how's it going to affect, who's it going to affect. That comes with maturity. That comes with interaction with other people and seeing through experience what's acceptable, what is not, what's normal, what's abnormal, what's proper, what's improper, what's a responsible thing to do. And then with taking those things into account as he matures, he's able to make responsible choices and good decisions. And that becomes a shikol das. By the time he's bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, Torah tells us that he has enough sense of basic responsibility to be able to make the right choices, and he can now become able to fulfill mitzvahs and be obligated to do so. That's what Das is. Das advances as we go older, hopefully, as we mature further and learn more in life, that we get more of a yeshiva Das, more settled and well thought out, well contemplated decisions and choices that we make. A person could advance further and even develop with a lot of learning Torah to have Das Torah. We have to make a judgment based on knowing the values the Torah teaches us. And in fact, the Mishnah at the end of Maseches Kinem, at the end of Seder Kodshim, says that Ziknei Talmidei Chachamim, Talmidei Chacham as they age, Daiton Misyashevas Aleim, Kozman Shemaskinam Daiton Misyashevas Aleim. Their das increases. Now, elderly Chachamim don't become smarter, faster, better memories. Those things are when they were young. But sage judgment, a solid opinion, knowing what's right, to be able to really assess a situation responsibly, you could live with what they say. because they have greater Das. The Das is that ability to be able to assess situations, understand the ramifications, and make responsible judgments with a shikul hadas, weighing all the things properly and taking it all into context. That's why a Katan is not a bar das, even though he's very smart. But Das comes with maturity. So now let's get back to the Cheresh. A Cheresh ein madar v'eino shemeya. Why is he not a bar das? He's very intelligent. He's very smart. But you see that doesn't cut it. That doesn't make necessarily Das. Das depends on the ability to develop that kind of right sense of judgment, of responsibility, of knowing what's right in every situation. And that comes with interactions with people. When someone can't interact, when someone can't exchange ideas, they can't hear what anyone else has to say, and they can't express what they're thinking and see what other people respond to it. When there's no such dialogue, when there's no such conversation and discussion, he can't round out his thinking, his mind. He doesn't get his das right. That's why a cheresh is eina medaber v'eino shemeya, is eina bar das. This is a chiddush that emerged 150 years ago from an incident that happened with the Ksaf Sefer. The Ksaf Sefer was Mamali Makom. He replaced his father. He took the place of his father, the great Chassam Sefer, as being the leader of Yiddishkeit and a Pesach Hador for the Austrian and Hungarian jury. He was a gadol of many psukim. And in the Civil War era of the 1860s, he heard about a school for the deaf that was taking on advanced methodologies of sign language that they were developing to educate. Until that point, a cheresh, an eina medaber v'eino shemeya, was dealt with like a shaita and was just locked up in an institution like an insane asylum and fed and taken care of and never developed and never became anything. Indeed, he was dealt with like a shaita. This school in Vienna was one of the forerunners of modern-day sign language, and they were using it to educate their children, Jewish and non-Jewish children, in this Institute for the Deaf in Vienna. The Ksaf Sefer went himself to visit and observe and judge what's going on over there, and he was so impressed with the level of intelligence and education and advancements and behavior and sense of responsibility that he saw in the children there. They were being educated through sign language, even though they could not speak a word and they could not hear anything, but they were communicating and they were advancing in their studies. He said, these people, I think they're B'nai Das. He asked the headmaster of that Institute for the Deaf in Vienna to buy, at his expense, at the Ksaf Sefer's expense, buy tefillin for all the Jewish boys that are there, because they're mechuyev mitzvahs, based on the fact that they could communicate so well. This was a landmark chiddush, psak from the Ksaf Sefer, saying that it's not an absolute rule etched in stone that eina medaber v'eino shemeya is necessarily and absolutely an eina bar das and patur min mitzvahs. But rather, it's a developmental issue. It's not a limud from a pasuk. It's not a lach Moshe Sinai. If it would be a gzeres akasav, a rule from the Torah, it would be unnegotiable, it would never be changeable. Torah is nitzchi, it's forever. But he said, no, this is a developmental issue. They can't communicate, they can't speak, they can't learn, they can't talk, they can't discuss anything with anyone. That's how they become a shaita. But now these people, they have open communication, they have discussions, they have debates, they have arguments, they interact with a whole group, a large group of people. They're B'nai Das. This was the chiddush of the Ksaf Sefer, which actually, if you take a look at Rashi over here on Daas and Chagiga, Rashi almost says it. Rashi says, why is it, during Maskal Cheresh, Beis on Beis, why is it that an eina medaber v'eino shemeya, someone that can't hear, can't speak, is not a bar das and it's patur min mitzvahs? Rashi says, hachi kimlu l'Rabbanan. This is something the Rabbanan were able to understand and establish. The misha eino shemeya v'eino medaber, that someone can't hear and can't speak, to la b'nei deya ninhu, that they're not therefore b'nei das. Hachi kimlu Rabbanan means this is the Chacham's assessment of fact. This is not a lach Moshe Sinai. This is not a yalfusa limud from a pasuk. This is something Chacham will understand what's going on in the world and how people act and the nature of people. And they say someone that can't communicate can't be a bar das. But these people that with his sound language could communicate, they are b'nai das, and therefore yechayev in mitzvahs. Shlomo Zalman, in his Minchas Shlomo, explains this theory further. The Rabbi Yashiv brings it based on a Ritva and Yevamos Kuf Daled. But it's really consistent with the Rambam, what we mentioned before in the Perish Mishnayos and Trumos, where the Rambam says the cause for Cheresh is the cause for the illness is Cheresh. It's all caused. The reason he can't speak is because he can't hear. It's a developmental issue. If it's not a mental issue, it's not because there's something wrong in his mind, that he's somewhat insane or crazy in some kind of a way, right? It's not a mental health issue. It's a speech issue because it's a hearing issue. And if they could get past that and they're able to have speech, they're able to have communication, able to interact with people, able to develop normal kinds of thinking patterns, knowing what normal thoughts are all about, it's developmental. And therefore, with someone that could develop normally in a whole community of people that communicate in this way manually, they're bar Daas. This is the Chiddush of the Kesef Sefer. A contemporary of his, Talmud, also of the Chasam Sefer, the Maram Shik, disputed this with the Kesef Sefer. And during this century that followed that, the next 100 years of Paiskim, there's back and forth and back, different shuvos, taking either side, those that say yes, those that say no, like or not like the Kesef Sefer's Chiddush. But this remains an open question, and there's a good solid svara to say that someone that's able to communicate well is a bar Daas. Shlomo Zalman, in his tshuva, sums it up and he says that it's more mustaver to say, it makes more sense, Api Das Torah, to say that these people are b'nei Das, and that the Cheresh is not a Gzeres Akosov that learned that from a Pasuk or Lavosh Sinai, but rather it's a developmental issue. There is a Kesef Sefer that seems to say it's a Lach Moshe Sinai about someone that developmentally can't communicate, and allows for the possibility, but if you could communicate, then the Lach Moshe Sinai doesn't apply, which allows for the room for his psak of the Kesef Sefer. And therefore, the Rosh Shlomo Zalman concludes that even though it's Kash Lachriya, we're not really capable of conclusively deciding something that's been argued about by generations of poskim before us. But it's much more difficult to say that they're part of a mitzvahs and to exempt them from mitzvahs when most probably more misdavar that they're included in mitzvahs, and therefore we have to include them in the mitzvahs, even if they can't hear or speak whatsoever, and just communicate with manual sign language. The Rabbi Yosef in Yechav Daas concludes and says that it's at very least a Safek Drabanan, very most a Safek Drabanan, and therefore by it, at least, let me just edit this loud, let me. Rabbi Yosef in the Yechav Daas concludes that it's at least a Safek, and therefore by all issues of Drabanan, we can say Safek Drabanan Lakula. So for almost everything that happens in a shul and in minyan-wise, it's all the questions of a drabanan to be able to count it into a minyan, to be able to have kriyas of terror, to say kaddish and kedusha and such. And therefore, for all drabanans, you could count him in, because even though he can't hear and can't speak, he's mechuyev mitzvahs at least on, we could pass on that in regard to drabanans. In regard to deraises, we suffer derais l'chumra. There we have to be more machmir. So we won't have a person that can't speak and can't hear blow over for other people to be yotze with on Rosh Hashanah. But for his own self, he definitely should do mitzvahs, all the other mitzvahs of the whole Torah, Shabbos and all the mitzvahs, because according to a very strong side in halacha, he's mechuyev mitzvahs. This is all without a cochlear implant, without a hearing aid, just pure sign language with no hearing and no speaking whatsoever, which classically, according to the halacha of the sugya, should be ein madar v'ein shemeya, is like a cheresh of a katan. But with the development of sign language, it could be that he's now considered to be a bar chiyuva. In regard to those that have nowadays hearing aids and cochlear implants, we're going to continue in the next segment and speak about the halacha ramifications of that. I just want to mention that these halachas and their sources are in a booklet of the Torah Cheresh that was put out by the OU, and it's available from the Arway division of the OU. 212-613-8234. One more time, 212-613-8234, or email at rway@ou.org, and you could order over there. It has all the sources and explanations for that, and we look forward to continue in the next segment tomorrow by the show.